Hello guys. So today we will be discussing about the relevance of sociology paper 2, especially with reference to sociology, that how sociology helped in answering various aspects of general studies paper 2. In general studies paper 2 we have a section of social issues and welfare, but besides that you will find its relevance in other topics as well, as we will see further as we move along the various questions. Again, we are reiterating the fact that we have used sociological thinkers and their terms as a reference for your understanding. So you shouldn't use these jargons and terms in your answers, okay? It's just for your reference purpose. So let's just start and you will see how sociology is related to different aspects, okay? So first we'll see today a very first question that we have is with regard to constitutional morality. The question says that constitutional morality is rooted in the constitution itself and is founded on the essential facets. Explain the doctrine of constitutional morality with the help of relevant judicial decisions. Okay, so you might be thinking it's entirely a political question, but no. In sociology we have a branch of sociology which is political sociology, and you have in the UPSC syllabus as well. So you see that when we talk about constitutional morality is was framed by the constitution makers on the basis of the social background of Indian nationalism, the kind of the social structure that we had during the time of Indian nationalism, that were the main ideas which shaped our constitutional morality. In this way, you could relate the social conditions prevalent during the Indian nationalism to constitutional morality. Besides that, we have read about modernization of Indian tradition when we read about Yogendra Singh. So he talks that this constitutional morality is never static. Constitutional morality, despite the constitutional makers, okay, these constitutional makers, though they framed these constitutional moralities years before, but the constitutional morality is what? It's a dynamic concept. Just like our society and social relationship, the constitutional morality is also dynamic, and it is evolving with the ethics of society and the various court judgments that we see. Besides that, we also know that the constitutional morality is a product of all the historical protests, the social religious reform movements, all the various social movements, the farmer movement, the peasant movement, the Dalit movement, all of them have played an important role in shaping the constitutional morality as a whole. The women reform movement, all these. Again, the idea of constitutional morality was to inculcate the visions of social change. Okay, they wanted to make constitutional morality a dynamic concept which would change with the change in the existing situation, whenever there is a change in the social structure. So all of this could have been discussed. Okay, besides that, we can also mention that in today's scenario, the constitutional morality has been emphasized time and again by the judicial decisions. Like we find various decisions of Supreme Court where they insist upon allowing women in the NDA, maybe with regard to providing basic needs to the migrants during the COVID-19. So all of this could have been mentioned. The social disparities like gender, caste, tribe, all of these have also been emphasized through constitutional morality's evolution. Okay, so in this way you could have related various sociological ideas of modernization, reform movement, social background, social change to the idea of constitutional morality. Okay, coming to the second question talks about the desirability of greater representation to women in the higher judiciary to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. All these are sociological jargons. Okay, we all have been reading about this, the unity and diversity, expect the equity, where we talk about fairness, we talk about inclusiveness, where we talk about giving equal share to each one in the country's growth. Okay, so the question is asking about women, but in judiciary. Okay, so recently in news it has been there, the appointment of more number of women in the higher sections of judiciary. So in this context only this question has been asked. So the question says that whenever we will have new actors coming in, these new actors will bring them with themselves new rules. Okay, for example, if we have more women in the judiciary, okay, if there is a rise in the number of women in the judiciary, obviously it will lead the judiciary to think more in the woman's perspective. Okay, in women's perspective there would be more changes, there could be seen more reforms in the woman perspective. Okay, and also the woman would be inspired, okay, through the procedure of fairness. Okay, there is obviously a procedure of fairness which we find here, because many women are getting representation in the judiciary, so they will be inspired to work for it. Okay, so there are many sociologists like Kate Millett, the Kamala Vashin, who has talked about the impact of women in the power circle. Okay, that how can women influence if they are in the power? Okay, and how judiciary is one such power institution where women can play a decisive role. Okay, it also talks that if women are there in the judiciary, okay, it will lead to a greater sensitization in workplace. Okay, so they will obviously have a greater say in the workplace related sexual harassments, maybe workplace related, things, maybe like they can look forward towards introduction of maternity benefit leaves, maybe menstrual leaves and all these. Besides that, the representation of judiciary breaks the gender stereotype. Okay, what is the gender stereotype? That women are made for the pink collar jobs, that is nursing, okay, for the care economy, all these. So this cycle can also be breached and broken if women are represented more in the judiciary. So this is how beautifully this answer could have been presented using sociological imagination, I would say. Okay, and so the next question is, to what extent, in your view, the parliament is able to ensure accountability of the executive in India? Okay, so it is asking you about the parliament's role in ensuring accountability of the executive in India. So you might be thinking it's a political question, but yeah, we can obviously always have a sociological connotation. So who are accountable? At the very first, the public. If we see the public holds the parliament accountable, the parliament holds the ministers accountable through this question now and all these, and then you have the ministers who held the chief executive accountable through censure motion, through all other things are there. And these chief executives, they hold accountable the public officials, and again the cycle moves on, and the public officials similarly hold account of chief executive, they of ministers of parliament, and the cycle of accountability goes on. So how can we relate this to sociological ideas? So when you have read about Max Weber, okay, Max Weber, the ardent promoter of bureaucracy and authority, he says that whenever there will be excess powers of bureaucracy, it will be, somewhere the accountability will be lessened. So in this way, you can relate accountability to the bureaucracy. Also, you can talk about Marxian analysis, where Marx always believed that those people who are in power, may it be the parliamentarians, all of these are trying to put forward the ideas of bourgeois. Okay, they are just trying to be an instrument in the hands of these capitalists, and they will only put forward the view of bourgeois there. Okay, and they will not be working for the proletariat or the working class. This is what Marx believed. Okay, then you talk about Dalit sociologists. The Dalit sociologists, they have been emphasizing that parliament needs reservation, because whenever a Dalit will be in power, they will be definitely trying to bring about a change. Okay, in this way also you will say that representation in parliament also helps the executive accountable. We can also talk about here about the various allied theory. The allied theory, which talks about the concentration of power with the allied minority, and who doesn't allow the entire process to be inclusive. Okay, so all these things can be related to the above mentioned question. Okay, so the next question goes around is with respect to pressure groups. Okay, the pressure groups has been a repeated topic in sociology or GS and other fields as well. So the question talks about pressure groups that play a vital role in influencing public policy making in India. Okay, and how the business associations contribute. So your answer would be with regard to pressure groups. Okay, we all should know what are the types of pressure groups, how they influence and affect, because the question is asking about the vital role they play in influencing public policy. So first you have to answer this part of the question, and then how business associations like ASSOCHAM, okay, Confederacy of India, so all of this, how do they emphasize or they contribute to public policies. So let's see how you could have written this. We could have studied that the presence of such pressure groups, okay, the pressure groups, they avoid misuse of power, okay, and also they avoid concentration of power in single hand. They allow the power to be utilized properly for public welfare. This you could have mentioned. Besides that, you could also mention that, which Anthony Giddens says, that somewhere pressure groups make the democracy look more meaningful. Okay, it looks it made more meaningful for whom? The minorities. So it's very clearly said that the democracy is one which should look forward to the welfare of the minorities, and this is what Giddens said. And also it is believed that pressure groups promote the idea of democracy by retreating the three pillars. What are the three pillars? The protection, the participation, and promotion. You can also use here Robert Dahl. Okay, you have heard this name about his multiple power center theory, which says that in society the power should be divided among various groups so that the power is not concentrated and one does not seem to monopolize power. Okay, so that there is a control, check and balance. So this is what we can relate it to through pressure groups. So this is a way in which you can relate it to. Another negative connotation can be Marxian, which says that pressure groups, they only act as an instrument to serve the interest of the capitalist class, or so to say the allied section, or so to say the dominant section. Okay, this can be mentioned here. Okay, so you can see how many different kind of points we came across. Okay, so the next question we are moving forward is with regard to welfare state. Okay, so let's see the question. Besides being a moral imperative of the welfare state, the primary health structure is a necessary precondition for sustainable development. Analyze. So we already know that primary health centers are abysmally very lowly position because of the various issues. Okay, and besides that, it was an expected question because of the COVID-19 pandemic also. So here we'll see that how sociologically we could have answered these question. Okay, so if we see that it's very much necessary that to develop human capital and to keep the demographic dividend at the similar pace, we must ensure the development of health sector and ensure basic health services. Okay, you all know about the government schemes of Ayushman Bharat and all these. Besides that, it also says that if we don't have a proper health services, it will impact all other vulnerable sections, like it will lead to increase in maternal mortality rate for women. Okay, it will lead to tribal malnutrition, it will lead to anemic condition for the woman, as it was highlighted in the National Family Health Survey. So all of these could be seen. Besides that, health also can be related to social mobility. See how? If there is a family, okay, and if someone in the family has become sick out of maybe they have got cancer, so they would have saved maybe 1 lakh rupees, which they've used in something else for their increment in their life chances and lifestyles. But now they are spending this 1 lakh rupees on the treatment of this person who has got cancer. Okay, so in this way, the social mobility, okay, which could have been risen, they could have moved above the ladder in terms of relative mobility with respect to other groups. by occupying, maybe by buying a new AC, or maybe by buying a car or a new brand new iPhone, etc. But now they are using it for the health. So in this way, the out of pocket expenditure, okay, as it was mentioned in an economic survey as well, it leads to downgrading of the social mobility. Okay, this also you can relate to. Okay, and the need of primary healthcare centers are very much important to ensure village self-sufficiency, because people from the village nowadays, they move to urban areas because they don't have proper healthcare facilities in the villages, and which sometimes lead to the death of the person meanwhile. Also, many people today in the various pockets of India, many tribals, many villagers, they face the issues of social exclusion because of the lack of proper health services. Okay, so all these could have been related. You can also write here about the mental health and how sociology could help in the emerging issues. You can also mention here about the woman labor force participation. Okay, you can mention about the increasing role of woman sanitization and woman sensitization about the menstrual facilities. You can mention here about Orissa government's Khushi scheme, okay, which gives free sanitary napkins. So somewhere you can mention the state government's initiative to ensure a answer looks wholesome. Okay, in this way we can relate it to sociology and certain schemes. Into the next question which we have is question 7, which talks about earn while you learn. Okay, earn while you learn scheme needs to be strengthened to make vocational education and skill training meaningful. Okay, so this question says the need of vocational training, which was a part of our National Education Policy 2020. So here we'll see that how we can relate it to various sociological aspects. The very first is the skill training, what it will lead to. As we have discussed earlier, if we have good health, if we have good education, if we provide good skills, it will lead to development of human capital and undoubtedly development of demographic dividend. Okay. Besides that, if vocational education is given, then many women can become economically independent and they will not depend anymore on the men. Okay, and this will also lead to social mobility of these sections, the women, the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, all of these will be mobilized towards upward mobility. Okay, okay, so next is this will also lead to somewhere slumization of the cities, which means that if we increase the skill, okay, so somewhere people will be getting good amount of jobs, and the prime minister's Awas Yojana is also there, which will definitely lead to a change in the urban landscape where we have a lot of slums. So all of these can be seen. Also, India has a large informal sector. Okay, and if we will provide them with proper vocational training, it will lead to definitely growth of the formal sector and will also lead to reduction in the disguised unemployment. Besides that, vocational training can also be given to children with disabilities. Okay, so that, and also those children who face financial constraints at home, so that they can meet their day-to-day needs and they do not have to leave the education midway. Okay, so all of these can be related. The next question that we have is, can the vicious cycle of gender inequality, poverty and malnutrition be broken through microfinancing of SSGs? So self-help groups has been a repeated question, and the impact of self-help group in various pockets of the, especially the poor states like Odisha, Bihar, have been tremendous. Okay, they have been tremendously working for the welfare of the sections. So we would see that how this could be related to sociology. So undoubtedly, when you make the woman aware, okay, then it will lead to reduction in the exploitation of women. The woman would also become a earning member and would be skilled. Okay, and this will definitely lead to her empowerment. So SSGs have led to upliftment. Besides that, with SSGs are not just economically improving the woman condition, but it is also fighting against various social evils like child marriages, It has been making people aware about the various social evils like child marriages, female feticide. It is also working towards the improvement in the nutritional level of women. It also promotes the woman to go for institutionalized delivery. Okay, so all these, there are ASHA workers. So all these are working together. SSGs have also played an important role in changing the patriarchal mindset. Besides that, the with the help of the microfinancing facilities, there is obviously a feminization of agriculture. The women in agriculture are participating, but here today they are getting their dues. They are getting the good amount of money. Okay, so you can give the example of Kudambashri and the Lijjat Papad, which is the Shri Mahila Griha Udyog, okay, and how they have been successful. Okay, the next question which we can discuss is the foreign policy. The question 9. In the last few decades, where Asia's growth story, the next few are expected to be Africa's. Okay, we're talking about Asia and Africa. So we will be focusing on the similarities between both of them, though both of them were colonized. Okay, all of these we will be focusing. Again, the question goes that examine India's influence in Africa in recent years. Okay, so here we can talk about the sociological development and dependency theory of periphery, okay, which talks about Asia and Africa. We can also talk about the similarities between both the continents, as I said you, in terms of colonialism, in the social impacts and the economic slavery that they have gone through, the impact of the primary sector, okay, like the agriculture, the human resource development, the potential for both of them. And you can also talk about the religious hold in these regions and the traditional structures who shape these. Okay, and then again, obviously, you will move to the IR part, that how India has been contributing to these growth of Africa, which is obviously international relations part, but this sociologically you could have mentioned all these topics here. Next is with regard to CBI. So the question is that how CBI jurisdiction is limited because it has not got absolute power of inquiry in the state, and we have to mention it with regard to the federal character, okay, of India. So here you can mention about the concept of one nation state in India, where obviously CBI should be given power to analyze cases and detect cases in the entire country. You can talk about the federal polity, that is, we can talk about the federal characteristics of the polity here, about the multi-party system. You can talk about the diversity of our country based on religious, cultural, ethnic and racial things. And you can talk about that how there is an attempt of centralization. You can talk about the rise of right-wing politics, the homogenization of state entities. And you can also talk about the state's reaction, that how state is reacting to this centralization process and what are the various steps that should be taken. Okay, so this is how we can relate it to the political sociology portion. Okay, so next question is about human rights. Okay, so the question is about, though the Human Rights Commission have contributed immensely to the protection of human rights in India, yet they have failed to assert themselves as mighty and powerful. Analyze their structural and practical limitations, suggest remedial measures. Okay, that's a very good question again. So human rights is what? It includes everything, all the natural rights that we have and all the inalienable rights that we are bound to have. Okay, so here you can relate to the way in which such institutions like NHRC, State Human Rights Commission, all of these, they strengthen, okay, they tend to strengthen the human rights of citizens, and they protect the citizens from the arbitrariness of the state. Okay, so the state's arbitrariness and tyranny is limited when such commissions work. Okay, you can also talk about Marx. Marx always says negative, that such commissions only act as an instrument to inculcate the further domination of the dominant classes. You can talk about Weber's iron cage of bureaucracy, where we have no space left for creativity, and as a result, NHRC is one such institution where we find no space for creativity and innovation. Besides that, you can mention about the constitutional guarantee given to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Obviously, this you have to mention. And you can also mention that why NHRC needs to be made an autonomous body if we can take suo motu case even beyond 1 year. Okay, these are certain limitations that needs to be improved. And so certain topics which you can relate to sociology. So next question is with regard to the distinguishing features of the notion of equality in the constitution of USA and India. Okay. So when we talk about such questions, we usually tend to write about only about the polity or the international relations, but we can relate sociology here very beautifully. We can write about the equality theory and how equality was proposed in America first by different scholars like Thomas Paine, the Locke, the Voltaire, okay, and then subsequently you can mention about the concept of equality which was drawn to India, obviously from the America, but it was shaped by the Indian freedom struggle. Okay, Indian freedom struggle shaped India's idea of equality to a greater extent. Then you can talk about the differences in both the societies with the notion of inequality. In India, we have casteism. There we had racism. Okay, and then you can talk about the colonialism, the culture, etc. And also in political science, here you have to mention about the constitutional provisions also, where you talk about the move of the idea of equality in Indian constitution was basically earlier based on procedures established by law, but now we are moving towards the due process of law as we find in America. Okay, this is something that you could have mentioned here. Okay, so the next question is with regard to department related parliamentary standing committees. Okay, so it is asking that how these committees, they keep the administration on the toes and inspire reverence for parliamentary control. And you have to explain such committees with suitable examples, which is obviously a political part, but again, you can relate that how are these committees influencing the parliamentary control. So you can mention about the accountability which is fixed by using the Weber's concept which we discussed earlier. You can also mention about Marxian view that these parliament is just another instrument for bourgeois. You can also mention about a similar thing that we mentioned about the Dalit sociologists earlier, that the parliament can have to be taken into account because they represent the views of all the marginalized sections and the vulnerable sections. You can talk about the allied theory and similarly the multi-party system, etc. So this is the same thing which we discussed about parliament and its control over the executive. You can just relate it to the same question, okay, and just write it. And obviously you will add the political dimensions here. The next question is, how has digital illiteracy, particularly in rural areas, coupled with the lack of ICT accessibility, hindered socio-economic development? Okay, socio-economic development. Okay, so see, you can also mention here about the Acer report which came and which talks about the digital illiteracy and the problems of digital divide in rural areas during the pandemic. So here you mentioned about the digital divide, especially the women. So during the COVID-19, we saw that there were minimum registrations for vaccines from women because women had either no access to cell phones or they didn't know how to use it. Okay, this is what we call as this gender digital divide. We can also talk about mobility, that digital divide hinders the mobility of the less privileged classes because they don't have access to things. Okay, you might have seen various pictures during the pandemic about the problem that the children of underprivileged class faced. You can talk about the various accountability issues in the government. You can also talk about the problems of accessibility of smartphone because of poverty, okay, and inequality and all these. You can also talk about the agriculture stagnation, as many farmers They don't have access to such knowledge which is technologically given, and as a result the large farmers they mobilize. Okay, you can talk about the digital illiteracy and asymmetric human resource development. So all these can be related to the idea of digital device, okay, in the rural areas, and how you can make it accessible by providing technology to the students and teachers, by empowerment of students, by allowing students to have internet facilities, and mostly you can also don't ask people to donate smartphones and laptops if they have it in huge numbers. Okay, so the next question is, though women in post-independent India have excelled in various fields, okay, read the question very properly. Post-independent India excelled in many fields. The social attitude towards women and feminist movement has been patriarchal. Okay, apart from the women education and women empowerment schemes, what interventions can help change this milieu? The question asks you that despite the progress which has been made by women post independence, yet the attitude, the social attitude, mark the points, okay, social attitude towards women has been patriarchal. And also it says that we always talk about women's education, women's empowerment schemes, etc., but what else can we do? Okay, now see, there are a few things which we usually don't focus upon. So we have a World Economic Forum's global gender gap report, okay, global gender gap report, which ranks India at 144 out of 156 or 153 countries, 156 I think, which says that in India, women have least political participation. Okay, there are very less people who participate in the political processes in India. So this is one factor which we can look into. Okay, he was giving you an example. So you can talk about the feminist movements pre-independent, like we have the Phule, the Mahatma Gandhi, and how they used to keep a balance between home and the freedom movement. The post-independent, a lot of movements has been seen, the Mathura case, okay, the anti-dowry movement, the eco-feminist movements like the Chipko, the Sardar Sarovar movements. You can talk about the role of women empowerment in politics, which I have already said you. You can talk about the women empowerment by improving the woman health. Okay, you can focus on woman malnutrition to decrease the maternal mortality of women. You can talk about institutionalizing woman delivery. You can also look into the various issues in the National Family Health Survey, where they say that the many women are anemic. Okay, and this can also be looked into. Also, it says that there is a rise in the C-section delivery, which is also a matter of concern. Okay, so all these needs also to be checked, and you can quote examples from the various feminist scholars like Kamala Bashin, Dutsa Patnaik, Kate Millett, etc., in the change in terms of the attitudinal, social, and the economical issues. Okay, so in this way we can definitely relate sociology very properly to the ideas of feminist movement. So the last question which we have on our desk is, can civil society and NGOs present an alternative model of public service delivery to benefit the common citizens? Discuss the challenges to its alternative model. So here we can talk about all those that we discussed in the pressure groups, that how they, both the NGOs and the civil societies, okay, they can have act as an alternative model to make the government accountable to the public policies. Okay, and you can also discuss here about the multiple power center theory, that when we have multiple centers of power, it prevents monopolization of power. You can also talk about NGOs work in improvement in democracy and to make democracy as an institution for minority welfare. Also, these civil societies and NGO work towards decentralization of power. They aim to build trust, association in the democracy. Okay. And lastly, you can talk about the Marxian, the negative view as well, because always just giving one-sided view is not, doesn't make your answers wholesome. So Marx always says that the civil society also works just to fulfill the dominant section interest. And you can also mention about the role of civil society in climate change, in peace, okay, and refugee policy, all of these. You can describe it, okay. So in this way, you can relate very beautifully all the sociological concepts to even GS2. If you want further informations, you can visit our website, that is www.reliableandvalid.com. You can join our Telegram ID, that is Sociology and Social Issues. We keep on updating here about various sociological issues and current affairs. Okay, thank you so much.